Man, some of these old places, right? Especially churches or monasteries way out in the middle of nowhere. You expect a certain kind of peace and quiet. Maybe some old dust, a few cobwebs, that sort of thing. You definitely don't expect to find, well, what I found up at St. Isolde's Monastery. That place wasn't just forgotten by time. It felt like it was actively being used for stuff that was anything but holy. Let me tell you about it. St. Isolde's, it's a legend among us urbex folks who film for channels like mine, Forgotten Faiths. Perched impossibly high up in the Blackwood Mountains, the kind of place that's a serious pain to get to. Took me 2 solid days of hiking, and the last part was this sketchy, crumbling goat path that had my heart in my throat more than once. But when I finally crested this ridge and saw it, wow. Just wow. This cluster of ancient stone buildings clinging to the mountainside like they grew there, silhouetted against this dramatic, stormy gray sky. Looked like something straight out of a dark fantasy novel. Alright, Forgotten Faiths crew. I remember panting into my camera. The wind trying to rip the mic off. We finally made it. St. Isolde's. Supposedly abandoned for like 100 years or more. Let's see what prayers or what else still echo in these old stones. Getting in wasn't too hard, surprisingly. A heavy old oak door, probably a side entrance to what looked like the old refectory, was unlocked. Just swollen tight in its frame from years of damp. Had to put my shoulder into it. Stepped inside, and the air just hit me. Cold, heavy, smelling of damp stone, ancient dust. And this other faint, dry, almost herbal scent I couldn't quite place. The main area is the chapel with its vaulted ceiling and faded frescoes still clinging to the walls. The long refectory with massive wooden tables still in place. They were stunningly preserved under all the dust. I got some incredible footage just walking through, the only sound my own footsteps. And the constant, mournful sigh of the wind whistling through broken stained glass windows. It felt sacred, even in its decay. One spent most of that first day just filming the main structures, soaking it all in. It was getting late, the light outside fading fast, painting the inside of the chapel in these long, eerie shadows. I was filming near the main altar, a massive stone thing, when I noticed something behind it. Tucked away, partially hidden by a heavy, moth-eaten tapestry that had fallen from the wall, was this very low, narrow doorway. Hadn't seen it before. It looked like it led down, maybe into a cellar or a crypt. The door itself was different too. Newer, heavy iron, with a big, modern-looking padlock on it. Now, that just screamed wrong in a place like this. A modern, high-security padlock in a monastery, supposedly untouched for a century. What was that all about? Okay, guys. I whispered to the camera, zooming in on the lock. This doesn't look original at all. Why would someone lock up an old cellar this securely? Way out here. My urbex senses were tingling. This was where the real story might be. Luckily, I always come prepared for unexpected locks. It's kind of a necessary skill in this hobby, let's be honest. Took me a bit, maybe 20 minutes of careful work with my tension wrench and picks. The lock was decent quality, but finally, click. It sprang open. The iron door creaked inwards with a groan that seemed to echo up from the depths, releasing a gust of cold, musty air. That strange herbal scent was much stronger now, mixed with something else. A bit chemical, maybe. Flashlight on full beam, camera rolling, heart doing a little nervous dance. I started down the steep, narrow stone steps. They opened into this surprisingly large, barrel-vaulted stone cellar. Definitely not a crypt. No signs of burials anywhere. Instead, it was a storeroom. But not for old wine or monastic supplies. Oh no. Stacked neatly against the walls were these modern, heavy-duty plastic crates. Dozens of them. Some were stenciled with foreign lettering I didn't recognize, like Cyrillic or something. Others had these weird symbols that looked like shipping or customs marks. And in the center of the room, on a makeshift table made of old, rough-hewn planks, sat what looked like sophisticated radio equipment, a satellite phone, a closed laptop, some kind of antenna array, a small generator. All of it looked relatively new, well-maintained, and completely, utterly out of place in this ancient, holy mountain retreat. My blood, well, it didn't exactly run cold, but I definitely felt a serious chill. This wasn't ancient history. This was current. And it screamed illegal louder than any alarm bell. What was this stuff? Smuggled goods. The crates were sealed tight, heavy. I didn't dare try to open one. That faint herbal scent was definitely coming from some of them. The ones with the strange symbols. Holy crap, guys. I whispered, my voice barely audible over the thumping in my chest, panning the camera slowly around the cellar. I think St. Isolde's isn't quite as abandoned or as holy as we thought. This looks like some kind of serious professional smuggling operation, right here, underneath the chapel. The implications just slammed into me. These people, whoever they were using this incredibly remote, almost inaccessible sacred space as a base for their criminal enterprise. They had equipment. They had organization. And they probably had security. Or at least ways of knowing if someone like me stumbled upon their precious stash. Suddenly, the profound isolation of the monastery didn't feel like a cool urbex perk anymore. It felt like a perfectly designed trap. I knew I had to film as much as I quickly. The crates, the radio gear, the modern lock on the door, every creak of the ancient building overhead, every gust of wind outside, now sounded like approaching footsteps, like someone coming back. Then I heard something that definitely wasn't the wind. It was very faint, very distant, carried down through the stone from somewhere far above, outside the monastery. An engine. Not a car engine, nothing that could get up that goat path. Higher pitched, like a small drone, maybe. Or a very light aircraft passing low over the mountains. It was hard to tell, muffled by the stone and the wind, but it was definitely a modern mechanical sound. Were they coming back? A supply drop? Did they have aerial surveillance on this place? My heart just started hammering. This was way above my pay grade. This wasn't just exploring anymore. This felt dangerous. Okay, team, I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady for the camera. I think that's our cue. We are getting out of here, right now. I didn't need to know what was in those crates. Didn't need any more footage of the radio gear. I needed to leave. Scrambled back up those stone steps, pushed the heavy iron door shut, fumbled the padlock back on. Didn't even bother trying to actually lock it, just made it look locked, and then moved as fast and as quietly as. I dared back to the chapel, the refectory, towards that blessed side door I'd entered through. The hike back down that mountain in the rapidly fading light. Constantly looking over my shoulder, heart leaping at every snap of a twig, expecting to see figures emerging from the monastery high above or that drone buzzing overhead. It was one of the most terrifying experiences of my life. Every shadow seemed to move. Every gust of wind sounded like pursuit. Getting back to my beat-up truck, hidden miles away, and driving until I hit a main road with actual cell service. That was the escape. The immediate crisis was over. That was the resolution to the immediate danger. Later, back in civilization, safe, I thought long and hard about what to do. Eventually, I sent an anonymous tip to the authorities. Just the GPS coordinates. A vague description of suspicious activity and a few of the less revealing video clips. Never heard what came of it. Maybe they found the stash. Maybe the smugglers had already cleared out before anyone got there. Who knows, right? But the experience, man, it left a deep mark. The thought of that ancient, supposedly sacred place, desecrated like that, used for something so profane, the cold, calculated organization of it. The feeling of having stumbled into a very dangerous, very modern secret hidden deep within the layers of the past, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many other forgotten remote places out there are not truly empty, but are being used as sanctuaries for things that thrive in the shadows, far from prying eyes? Some echoes you find in old stones aren't from monks' prayers, but from something much, much darker and much more current. There are layers to old places like deserted monasteries, you know? You explore the main parts, the chapel, the library, the refectory, and they tell one story. But sometimes, if you look hard enough, you find the older, forgotten corners, places that whisper a different, often darker, tale. That's what I found at the ruins of an old clifftop friary in Scotland last year, while filming for my Forgotten Sanctuaries channel. It was a small, hidden cell unlike any other, and the energy in there, man, it was heavy. And what was on the walls felt less like ancient history and more like a raw, recent wound. The friary was perched on these dramatic sea cliffs, battered by wind and salt for centuries. Most of it was crumbling stonework, open to the sky. I'd spent a day filming the more obvious ruins, getting some fantastic shots of the coastline through broken arched windows. As evening approached, I was exploring a section that looked like it might have been the original, much older part of the structure, maybe a hermitage before the larger friary was built around it. It was more like a series of interconnected small caves and roughly hewn stone rooms built right into the cliff face. Most of these were just damp, empty hollows. But one, tucked away at the end of a narrow, crumbling passage, had a surprisingly intact, though very old, wooden door held shut by a rusted iron latch. Curiosity, my constant companion, got the better of me. The latch was stiff, but I managed to work it open with a bit of effort. The door creaked inward, releasing a gust of incredibly stale, cold air. Inside, it was tiny. A cell, really. No window, pitch black. My headlamp beam cut through the darkness, revealing rough stone walls, a low ceiling, a floor of packed earth. There was nothing in it, no furniture, no debris, just empty space. But the feeling in there was immediate and intense, oppressive, like the air was thick with something unspoken. As I panned my light around, I started seeing them. Carvings, scratched deep into the stone walls. Not ancient religious symbols, not like the faded Celtic knots I'd seen elsewhere in the ruins. These were different, raw, almost frantic. They looked like words, but in a spidery, desperate script I couldn't immediately decipher, mixed with strange repetitive symbols, spirals, jagged lines, things that looked like distorted eyes. And they covered almost every inch of the four walls. Whoa, I breathed, my voice sounding loud in the small, dead space. I moved closer, camera rolling, trying to get a clear shot of the carvings. They weren't shallow scratches. These had been gouged into the stone with serious effort, maybe with another rock or a piece of metal. Then I started to make out some of the words, or what I thought were words. They were in English, but crudely formed. Forgive me. They made me. Sigh. Can't sleep. The whispers under the stones. Scattered amongst the symbols, these phrases repeated, sometimes overlapping, sometimes scrawled upside down or sideways. It was like a desperate, fragmented confession, or the ramblings of a mind pushed to its limit. The crime horror alarm in my head, the one that usually looks for smugglers or modern day trouble, started to ping, but in a different way. This felt like evidence of a past crime, a past torment. But how past? The carvings looked weathered, but the sheer volume, the intensity. It felt like it had taken someone a very long time. I ran my fingers lightly over one of the deeper grooves. The stone was cold, damp. That faint, sweet, almost metallic smell I'd noticed in other very old, confined spaces was present here too, but stronger. And the feeling of oppression, it was almost physical. Like the cell itself was holding on to the anguish of whoever made these marks. Then I saw something that really threw me. In one corner, low down near the floor, amongst the frantic, older-looking carvings, was a newer mark. It was a simple date, scratched with something much sharper, much more recently than the rest. A PRIL 14. No year. Just April 14, and beside it, a small, fresh-looking smudge of something dark. Not paint. Something organic. I didn't want to look too closely. Didn't want to know what that smudge might be. April 14th. That was just a few weeks ago. This wasn't just ancient history. This cell, these carvings, they were still being added to, visited by who? Someone reenacting an old penance? Or someone with their own secrets, their own torment, who found this hidden, forgotten place and made it theirs? The air in the cell suddenly felt 10 degrees colder. The faint whispering sound I thought was just the wind outside seemed to coalesce, to become more distinct within the confines of these four walls, almost like voices too low to understand. But there, my own breathing sounded harsh, ragged. I filmed the date, the smudge, trying to keep my hand steady. This is not old, I said to the camera, my voice barely a whisper. Someone was here, just a few weeks ago. Someone is still using this cell. The idea that the person who scrawled "forgive me" and "they made me" might not be a figure from centuries past, but someone contemporary, someone who knew about this hidden place and came here recently, maybe was even nearby now. That was terrifying. What kind of person carves things like that into stone walls in a forgotten cliffside cell? What kind of crime were they repenting for? Or being forced into? I backed out of the cell slowly, never taking my eyes off the dark opening, flashlight beam fixed on it. Back into the narrow passage. Pushed the old wooden door shut. Fumbled the rusty latch back into place. Escaping the immediate confines of the cell was the resolution to that moment of intense dread. Got out of that older section of the friary, back into the more open, crumbling main ruins. Then out onto the cliff path as fast as I could, without actually running and breaking my neck. The sun was setting, painting the sea in fiery colors, but I barely noticed. The memory of that tiny dark cell, the desperate carvings, that fresh date, it stayed with me. It felt like I'd stumbled upon a raw open wound in the heart of that ancient place. Not a ghost story, but a human one. A story of torment, maybe guilt, maybe madness, still being written in stone in whispers. Who is EP? If I go by the other story. No, that's not right. That was the lighthouse. Who was this carver? What whispers did they hear? What was under the stones? And what was going to happen next April 14th? The questions are a heavyweight. It makes you realize that some abandoned places aren't just full of the sorrows of the long departed. Sometimes they still being used by the living for purposes too dark or too strange to comprehend. And you really don't want to be there when they come back to add another entry. When you're an urbexer, you go into these disused, forgotten places expecting to be alone. That's kind of the whole point, right? To explore the silence, the decay, without interruption. You might worry about structural instability, maybe running into some rats or other animals. You don't usually expect to find the place, well, actively guarded, especially not an old, crumbling monastery on top of a remote mountain. But that's what happened at the sanctuary of Del Monte Prede, though. It wasn't forgotten at all. It just had new and very unwelcoming tenants. This place was a legend in the more hardcore European urbex circles, the ones I sometimes feature on my channel, echoes from afar. Supposedly an ancient monastery, abandoned for centuries, almost impossible to reach, high in a really rugged, isolated mountain range. Took me and my climbing partner, Alex, 2 days of serious trekking and a final sketchy rope-assisted climb just to get to the plateau where it stood. It was magnificent. Stone walls, a crumbling bell tower, a small chapel, all clinging to the mountainside, clouds swirling around it. Looked like something out of a fantasy epic. "This is it, Alex," I said, camera already rolling. "The big one. Let's see if it lives up to the hype." We spent the first few hours just exploring the outer buildings. The main chapel. Standard stuff, really. Incredible stonework, faded frescoes, a lot of collapsed roofs, but surprisingly little vandalism given how long it had supposedly been empty. The air was thin and cold up here. The silence was absolute, broken only by the wind whistling through the empty arches. As evening started to draw in, we were looking for a sheltered spot inside one of the more intact outbuildings to set up our bivy bags for the night. We planned to get some night shots and explore more in the morning. That's when we found the clean room. It was a small, single-story stone structure, maybe an old scriptorium or prior's office, slightly detached from the main complex. The door was heavy oak, but unlatched. Inside, it was different. While the rest of the monastery was thick with dust, cobwebs, and debris, this room was relatively clean. The stone floor looked like it had been swept, albeit a while ago. There was a rough wooden table and 2 simple stools. On the table, an oil lamp, an old-fashioned one. But the glass chimney was clean, and it looked like it had fresh oil in it. And in one corner, 2 neatly rolled up sleeping bags. Modern ones. Synthetic, not ancient monk bene. Alex and I just looked at each other. Okay, he whispered. "Looks like we're not the only ones who know about this place. Someone's definitely been using this room recently." My heart started beating a bit faster. This wasn't just other explorers. This felt more permanent. More like someone's were using this incredibly remote monastery as a regular hideout or retreat. Who and why? Then I noticed something else. On the wall above the table, someone had tacked up a large, hand-drawn map of the surrounding mountain range. It was detailed, but with strange symbols marked at various points. Symbols I didn't recognize from any normal topographical map. And next to it, a list. Just a list of dates. Drawing back several months with short, cryptic notes beside each one. NW approach clear. Activity Valley South. Stonefall on East Path. It looked like surveillance notes or patrol logs. "Alex," I said quietly, pointing my camera at the map and list. "This isn't just camping. This looks like some kind of observation post. Or a very secluded meeting point." The vibe in the room, which had just been surprising a moment ago, now felt genuinely menacing. Were we trespassing on some kind of clandestine group's turf? Survivalists? A weird cult? Or something more criminal? The isolation of the place suddenly felt a lot less appealing. We should probably get out of this specific room, Alex muttered, already backing towards the door. Stick to the main ruins. Good call. We retreated from the clean room, pulling the door shut, and decided to set up our camp in a more open, defensible part of the old cloisters. But the discovery had cast a shadow over the whole exploration. The silence of the monastery didn't feel empty anymore. It felt watchful, like we were being observed by people who knew these mountains, knew this ruin far better than we did. As darkness fell completely, the wind picked up, howling through the crumbling archways. We had a small contained fire going, mostly for a bit of warmth and to boil water for tea. Kept our voices low. Every gust of wind sounded like footsteps. Every distant rockfall sounded like a signal. We were both on edge. Around midnight, I was on watch while Alex tried to get some sleep. I was sitting with my back to a solid stone wall, camera set up on a mini tripod pointed towards the main entrance to our cloister area. Just in case. Listening. Just listening. Then I heard it, faint, but definite. Voices. Human voices. Not English. Some other European language, maybe? Carried on the wind, indistinct, but definitely a conversation, not just random sounds. Coming from the direction of that clean room, the one with the map. My heart leaped into my throat. They were here. The occupants, whoever they were. How many? Were they armed? Did they know we were here? My mind raced. I woke Alex instantly, just a hand on his shoulder, finger to my lips, whispered, "People." I heard voices from that office. He was awake in a second, alert. We both listened. The voices came again, a bit clearer this time. 2, maybe 3 people speaking in low, urgent tones. Still couldn't make out the language or the words. Then we saw a light, a faint, flickering orange glow, like from an oil lamp or candles, coming from the windows of that detached building. They were definitely in there. What do we do? Announce ourselves? Hey, sorry to crash your secret mountain island. Didn't seem like a great idea. Try to sneak out in the dark down that treacherous climb we'd made. Even riskier. We were trapped, essentially. The immediate resolution was to stay hidden, stay silent, and pray they didn't decide to do a tour of the rest of the ruins that night. We doused our small fire, packed our essential gear quietly, and found the deepest, darkest archway in the cloisters to press ourselves into, hoping the shadows would hide us. The next few hours were the longest of my life. Listening to the wind, the distant, muffled voices, sometimes a snatch of faint laughter, imagining them coming to find us, wondering who they were. Were they just extreme hermits who didn't like visitors? Some kind of survivalist group? Or were they involved in something more serious? Something that would make them very unhappy to find 2 urbex vloggers with cameras? Just before dawn, the faint light from their building went out. We waited another hour until the sky was properly gray before daring to move. Peeking out, the monastery was silent again, looking just as deserted as when we arrived. Were they gone? Or just sleeping? We didn't wait to find out. Decided to risk the descent in the pre-dawn light. It was terrifying scrambling down those rocks, expecting a shout or a gunshot from above at any moment, but nothing happened. We made it down to the lower trail, and then we didn't stop moving until we were miles away. Getting off that mountain, putting distance between us and St. Elian's, was the escape. We were safe. That was the resolution. But the questions, they burn. Who were those people? What were they doing up there in that incredibly remote, ancient monastery? Were they criminals using it as a hideout or for smuggling, as the map and notes suggested? Or some kind of isolationist cult? We never found out. We didn't report it either. Who would we report it to? And what if it just brought trouble back on us? The footage I got of the clean room and the map is carefully locked away. It's a reminder that sometimes when you go looking for forgotten places, you find out they're not forgotten at all. They're actively claimed. And their current occupants might be far more dangerous and have far more to hide than any centuries old ghost. It makes you think twice about whose silence you might be disturbing.